Okay. Yes, look.
Do
I think we're slow. Somewhere here. So.
We are live. We're going live.
Are you kidding? I had more kids waiting for me than I ever had in my life.
Miss Linda, you ready to lead us in the
Oh,
pledge?
really?
All right, we're gonna
Was
open
it
up the
great?
session. Pledge of Allegiance. Miss Linda.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. So first off, I want to thank everybody for showing up for a special call. Congratulations on the election of the council.
Congratulations to you too.
And I'm looking forward to working together for the next 2 years. Plus some more. And I think we're coming together, realizing each other's strengths and appreciating one another more. And I appreciate on a beautiful evening, which we're not going to have this kind for, but very short order, maybe one more, to come down here and talk about a very important topic tonight. So we've got a special call meeting tonight with a singular reason, for the special call reason being to identify, discuss, and consider emergency shelter needs for the city. So what's this all about? As we have been working, Nita's been working diligently, and we have supported her in the budget and in her quest to come up with a way that we can get some emergency services added to our portfolio. And so why do you have grants? You have grants because you're trying to enable someone to do something that you cannot do for yourself. I think that's the most basic need in my gray matter. And so what is the legitimate need? So as we go down through trying to look at, identify, and list the criteria for qualified applicants for a proposed emergency grant, one thing that occurred to me, maybe having a birth defect of being an engineer, is this is a solution. That when you say, I'm going to search for a way to have a shelter, a substantial size with certain amenities and certain things that we can utilize to help our citizens in time of trouble. That sounds great. And it is great. I think all of us agree on that. But when you go to set forth the criteria for what it is that you need to really meet it, what are the scenarios that would be the circumstances that we're trying to prepare for? Okay, so this is a council sponsored thing. What are the particular circumstances that can happen that an emergency shelter, we look for an emergency shelter to help us with? Okay. So I go back to my experience in the community, and I draw on, I can think of 3 occasions in particular, and they're all cold weather occasions. You know, there's twice that I can call on that we shut down the interstate due to governor mandate, and we had people in our communities. And then of course, I think of the big one, the ice storm. And that's what I come up with. And so this workshop is to think about the types of emergency scenarios that we would utilize such a shelter. What are we shopping for? And that would help us define the criteria to what is going to help us to satisfy a solution during those times of crisis. That's what this is all about. And so I don't look for it to be a terribly long session. We can talk about a lot of things for a long time and not make much progress, but we don't need to be in here 3 and 4 hours. I mean, no longer than an hour and a half or something like that to just kind of think about and maybe brainstorm some situations where we know that we would utilize an emergency shelter, and who we could envision that we're trying to put in that emergency shelter, and what are the things that is needed for. Because one of the things we've been talking about is on different levels. You know, the recent disaster in our community didn't affect Calvert City directly, but we all know somebody who was impacted by the terrible circumstances of the tornado. Then that's paramount on their mind. And so with that, I guess just to try to kick this thing off. We don't really have a real structured discussion planned, but just kind of go and talk about times and shortcomings and concerns we have in protecting our citizens. And I'm gonna start off with Nita.
Start off with somebody else.
Okay. All right.
I think that would be fair because I monopolize it all the time.
You what?
I monopolize it, so I'd
Oh,
rather start
okay.
with somebody
Well,
else.
Tenary, would you like to, do you have anything to throw out as a scenario where emergency shelters would help our community and things that you can imagine that would befall us, and as far as emergencies where we would utilize such a,
Well, you've already named them. We all lived through those.
Mhm.
So I think those are perfect examples.
yeah.
I mean, I'd hate to say it, but terrible things can happen. And what if, you've named them. We've lived through them.
Yeah,
We know what it means.
yeah, I'm concerned that I've got tunnel vision, and I'm looking to make sure that everybody has a chance to think about it, and that we're talking about thinking about what the emergencies might be, and what are the things that we could utilize. And we're not operating in a vacuum. There are some guiding documents that the county has, that the city is part of, that we haven't drug out because it's 395-page EOP, emergency operations procedure. And it talks about structures and all kinds of stuff in there. And it talks about the judges, well, the executive branches of the government entities, and that it's all in one big binder. But I'm more interested in Calvert City Council, that we said during the budgetary process, it was worthwhile, and we've set aside $100,000 in our budget to do something. And I would, very much like to talk about what our community needs and how this council would direct those funds.
Our community is special to this as well because we have the plants.
Okay.
So things that can happen here won't necessarily happen in Denton. I mean, that's, and I'm sure that if we were to say that this is something that we can offer, I feel confident that those plants would back us up on that decision.
Okay. So observation is that we can have manufacturing emergencies, chemical emergencies in our community, and the plants would back us up.
They would be in favor of something like this.
Okay. And the plants are. I mean, the plants put forth funds every year to maintain the Calvert area early warning system.
Yes.
Put forth funds to do some PR work to get people to register for Code Red, which I'll take the commercial for anybody watching this. Code Red, get registered if you're not registered. Put forth funds to for a mascot to do some education in schools and stuff. So the plants
Yes.
do those sorts of things. Yes, Jeremy.
I didn't want to interrupt. I didn't want to be the guy from the clouds interrupting, but a potential talking point to kind of kick things off. We talked about these examples, things we've actually lived through. Would our solution, in any of those scenarios, you can kind of take them one by one if you want. Was there a need for a facility like we're proposing, or a resource like we're proposing, that would have been valuable, and we kind of look back and wished we had it?
Could you go over that again?
We're turned off mostly, Jeremy. Try it again.
I get you.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
we have
sorry.
to put you on speaker.
Oh, can you hear me now?
A
Yeah.
lot better.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was just saying, all of your examples, things that we've actually lived through, these scenarios, what we're proposing, or what we've kind of identified as a solution, that resource, that facility, that that we're like working towards, in any of those examples, was there a need for that, that we've looked back and kind of wished we had that?
I think the ice storm may have been one of those.
Yeah.
With the ice, if you don't mind, during the ice storm, we opened up originally the the night that it all hit, we opened up the Civic Center as a warming center. But we lost power, and so we had to wind up shutting it down. Later on, we actually opened up City Hall after we had a generator installed as a warming center also. But by that time, most of the people had already found some other place. And so Gene actually, I know Gene for sure, because I remember him being there, actually set in and manned the warming center. I can't remember. There were
I
several
think- I
others,
think
I
the-
think, needed volunteered.
During that case, I don't know how many days after the event it was before we got City Hall hooked up. Now,
Yeah.
City Hall does have
We have a generator
a
now.
generator now.
So,
My point that I was going to make was that people, if we had had a warming center and if we had a generator like what we're talking about, and there could have been a place where there was power when the power was out, people might not have had to go to Paducah and Clarksville and other places like that. It might not have been comfortable, but it would have been a resource that they had. They could drive to that. And there, I'm sure, were people who did not have the resources to drive to Paducah or to Clarksville or to other places.
Mhm.
but of course, there is a
But that's
difference.
not saying that you did anything wrong. That's not what Jeremy is saying. It's saying what we're proposing, could this have helped?
Yeah, that's the
way I
question.
understand it.
That's the
And
question.
So that's what I'm saying, that yes, this situation probably could have helped in the ice storm.
So in evaluating, I think there was a couple of days between losing power at the Civic Center and losing that resource. There was a couple or 3 days, maybe longer. I don't recall the time frame, where we didn't have City Hall fired up and we had to drag a generator in. I think this is getting to the crux of the situation. So there's a 2 or 3 day period, to answer your question, Jeremy, that if we'd had a facility with proper room where you could take care of personal needs, in essence, get a shower and have some sleeping quarters, that it would have been a benefit. And we didn't have that during ice storm.
We were lucky at our house that we had a generator, a small generator from the company that we're employed by. That weekend, we drove to Clarksville. We were fortunate enough to find a generator that Tractor Supply had just gotten in a load, and we had the funds to buy a generator. And we brought it back home, had it wired into our house, and we were really good. But there was a span of 3 or 4 days there that I didn't hear from my grandchildren, that I didn't know where they were from. And I can tell you for sure that if that ice storm had hit 15 years prior to that, I would not have had a generator, and I would not have had the funds to have bought a generator. And there's lots of people in that position.
From the seat that I sit in, I know of families that are bad off just because it snows. So whenever the ice storm, I was not in my seat at that time, but I can't imagine. And it breaks my heart to think that those kids were cold and what did they have to do to save them. So to say that there's not a need here, or there is.
Well, I don't think anybody's saying that. I mean, we're trying to identify.
Well, it could have definitely have been used during the ice storm.
Okay.
Definitely.
So what was needed? And what we're after is the parameters. The thing that John brought up, I think the fire department and maybe some law enforcement took turns manning that warming center downstairs.
And were
And
they
it-
able to stay the night there?
Yeah, but it was so, by the time we got that thing open, it was so far advanced, there weren't everybody had already found a place to go to.
And
There wasn't
Were
as
there
big a
cots?
demand as you would
Yes.
think during the ice storm. Because homes still existed. People weren't displaced because their home was destroyed. So a lot of people who managed with gas alone, the tornado was a whole different beast. Not only did it take people out of their homes, it took their homes
if you
completely
have
away.
gas and you don't have electricity to power those gas furnaces like we
It
did,
did- well,
we didn't
mine-
have any power.
Well, I had
We didn't have any gas.
mine, I was able to cook, take a shower and heat because I had gas fireplace, but that's beside the point.
We added
It
gas
was-
lines when we bought our house.
Yeah.
So we were just very fortunate that we could do that.
Yeah,
But those
but I'm-
houses on my street don't have gas.
I'm just saying that we did not have the request for sheltering to a large degree. We had requests for sheltering that was there. But it wasn't the mass like you see with a tornado. Now, that's a real scenario. You know, we've seen it. So we know that that's a real scenario. But I don't know whether we just didn't have any shelters in town. The shelters during the ice storm were all in Benton. There was 2 of them in Benton, and we actually carried people over that didn't have rides. So we actually transported people over there for that purpose.
And that goes back to answer the question, if we'd had something like that and people had known there was a shelter that could have provided for a great number of people, you would not have been transporting anybody to Benton. They would have known.
Right. I mean, the thing is that the tornado showed us that we were not prepared here in Calvert City if that would have hit here. We're not prepared for the kind of destruction and being able to supply for the people that we needed to supply for. So I think our goal here should be to try and prepare for the worst situation
And hope it doesn't.
and then
happen.
hope it never happens. And then the smaller situations, like I said, I agree. There's not going to be as many people during an ice storm that's going to need shelter. Those people are going to be able to take care of it at themselves. But if we're prepared for the worst, we can handle the best.
And the other thing is, in a disaster of that magnitude, you don't know what's going to be the target.
You don't.
You don't know what, where, or how much of it will be a target. In that case, that was just, I know it was,
So you try to prepare for
That's
that
correct.
worst situation that you've got. I mean, that's what the fire department's going to do. They're preparing for the worst.
Mhm.
And hopefully that's something they never see.
Well, I think we got some things in front of us, and Jeremy asked a very good question. You know, we've observed during the ice storm, by the time we got power on and we had manning here, and I'm going to offer up the proposition that the folks, you needed shelter before then, and most of those folks had found something. And that's why timeliness is an important criteria, I believe, in this. So what are the parameters that are required that we can't build ourselves? I mean, we'd be talking about a structure if we wanted to build a city-owned facility that would be very expensive, would be hard to maintain, in a set of readiness and with all the emergency gear. So that's something we really don't see the path to getting to right now. So we're looking at, okay, can we utilize some taxpayers' funds? That's what they are, to meet the purpose of better preparing us for an emergency. So what do we need to happen? What is it that the city needs, and what can we facilitate happening with a partner? So looking into the criteria. So we've kind of thought about this a little bit. So what are the characteristics and criteria that we need to make as a qualified expense? Now, not everybody's going to meet every criteria, but what would be the things that we're looking for?
Let me ask a question to sort of help you guys think about the situation. We are, I assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, I assume we're talking about a shelter that would be useful not only for the pneumatic fault swallowing Calvert City, but also for an ice storm or just a long stretch of cold water, or cold weather, or losing power. Are we looking for a great breadth for a facility that would be used in all of those situations?
I think we're primarily talking about a loss of electricity, aren't we?
And
That's the
shelter,
question.
and having shelter.
And you could have a loss of electricity for a lot of reasons, including an earthquake, a cyber attack, a power grid failure, if it happened at the wrong time.
Right.
Now, you got generators here and you got them some other places. But I think that there could be a lot of things, and they seem far-fetched, but I don't think we thought we would have an ice storm like that either.
Well, one of the snow emergencies, we had a 14-incher and it came up and it was I think it was poorly forecasted. I don't remember the year. They shut down the interstate and drug people. The police were dragging people off the interstate, brought them to the Civic Center, dropped them off. And we had power. I was up at the pharmacy that next morning, and chatting up a guy and he was from like Minnesota or something. And yeah, we're over here at the Civic Center. Really? Who's we? Had 35 or 40 people over there.
Yeah.
That the PD gathered up off the shut down interstate and got them in there, unlocked the door and said, and they had a lot of stuff, very, very busy, had a lot of stuff to do. In there, no guidance, basically had some shelter, he had some heat and had some restrooms. Okay. And this guy was over trying to call a doctor to get a script because they didn't have the proper medicine over and over. Charlie was alive, I think, trying to get that done. Looked over and there's a parking lot full of cars. And I called Mike Harrell, said, hey, Red Cross know anything about this? No, we didn't. And they got over there sometime, 3 or 4 hours later. And I think they found some TVs and got some food and did that kind of stuff. But in that overnight hour, those people were just jammed in a place. I don't know what they were able to get. I think a lot of them were transported by police and didn't even have their own belongings. Were still stuck on the interstate in the trunk of the car, probably. So that's a scenario. So for me, what I'm going to try to do here is get up and start writing down some criteria, some things that we're looking for that would aid in these situations, and try to get that list to go through.
You'll be right. You can talk.
Okay, that'll work.
It seems like what you're saying is that providing a shelter that would have electricity, even though you wouldn't have it in the normal way we do by sticking your appliance in or plug into an appliance. You're talking about something broader in scope, like all of a sudden having cots and food that could be gotten there in a hurry, and some sort of organization. I don't mean organization as in Lions Club or a church. I'm talking about just some systematic way to handle a whole bunch of
That was why,
wildly varying kinds of catastrophes.
that was why we were the Red Cross involvement.
And none of them are going to work. Okay. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Or offer a suggestion.
Okay.
If you Google American Red Cross emergency sheltering, there is a handbook that the Red Cross has on their website for emergency sheltering with all the rules, regs, what they will do when they come in.
That's for the Red Cross interaction and their requirements.
It has everything in it.
Okay.
Everything from, from babies, how you care for babies. If a parent can get to work, what's the parent required to do for childcare? Because the Red Cross is not going to take care of the babies. The parent can bring somebody in, but I mean, it gives you everything line for line, any scenario you could think of. It's 144 pages. There are links to probably another 144 pages that you can print on.
Sounds like a very good resource. And I've actually seen that and haven't delved through it.
I have.
Okay. All right. So if we have the emergency that is the ice storm and Red Cross does activate,
Mhm.
and we've got certain community partners in here, then I think that I've been made aware of 3 that have partnered with Red Cross.
There's 2 active agreements in the city right now. That's all.
Is Altona Church in the city?
It's not, they got an active agreement.
Okay.
Only 2 churches with active agreements,
All right.
and that's for the Red Cross.
I've been told by some folks in leadership at Altona that they thought they had one. So they thought. And I'm aware of that. I've talked to them. But they're going to get here when in the tornado, they showed up for some period of time. So, in my mind, it's that those first few critical hours, when bad stuff has happened, my house is tore up, I got rain coming in on me, the power's out, you got the howling wind, my place is freezing up, it's cold, I got to have some place to run to. So for me, the thing is those first critical moments is really very particular, and we're on our own as a community. Individuals are on their own. at that time. And these Red Cross guidelines would certainly help us pick up some standard operating procedures and practices and what to do and call out some stuff. But, as far as having a resource, the timeliness thing is one that's just really paramount on my particular mind. When the daylight comes and the news hits and word gets out and people start mobilizing. I mean, after the tornado, we were, Calvert City was here at the brink of it, and we had internet. Blair got on and other people got on, and we had publicity. I had a meeting today up in the little meeting room at the Civic Center. We filled that room up like 12 times. I mean, we had stuff coming in by 10 o'clock the next day because we still had communications and stuff. And so those were those critical moments. I mean, at that time, I think the school board had mobilized and made Central Elementary available for a drop-off point. We sent stuff over there times 12. But at those first few hours, those overnight periods, those first 3 days before, we really get activation and get the big help coming, that is something that really concerns me that this community needs. And I think that that's at the heart of what we're trying to get. I think that's what the heart of what the council wants too. So part of this is getting us kind of on the same page and understanding that. Or maybe I don't understand it. Making sure everybody, what is it that we need? So sheltering, we need adequate space. We can brainstorm here, right? So we need adequate space. And you can look up some numbers for the number of people and stuff. I mean, how many people are we looking to shelter? It's kind of a moot point. I mean, it's more of a function of what kind of spaces that we got available in the city. It's probably going to be more of a constraint than that. But there are some figures for square feet.
What's the 2 square feet per person?
2 square feet per person.
Yeah.
So how many people are we looking at trying to get?
If you had 45 or 4,500 square feet, you could house 2,500 people, somewhere around there. I think that's what I had. Let me read. I don't have my math with me, but it's 2 square feet per person, and that's basically you'd have to.
I think it's more than that.
But you'd have to stand. I mean, it was, or maybe it was, in it.
Yeah, that's like a storm shelter thing, probably.
I think, mate, let me see if I can find what hold on just. I had it in that. Did you bring any copies of that
It
stuff
wouldn't
I
house
had?
me either.
I've got just the stuff that you got there.
You don't have the stuff where I started working and had the figures.
No, I've got it.
That's got a rough idea there.
So let me go on. I mean, the number of people you can house is a criteria, right? So that if we're going to evaluate whether you can do something, so is there some number and we can get into the fact and figures and look at the 144 pages of links and stuff like that. But how many people, a particular proposal, I mean, we're talking about a grant and a proposal. So how many folks would be an important criteria? How many people could you put in the space? So the number of adequate space, the number of people that could be helped. Ralph brought this up earlier. We need an immediate power source. So the generator, hence this is the solution that we all recognize the utility and the necessity of the generator. So, having the ability to have instantaneous power, and not one that I make a phone call and get one from the sewer department brought over and find an electrician some 4 hours later and, make sure it's disconnected properly from the power and I can wire it over, and you could do it in 12 hours or whatever. So we're looking at, we need an installation, one that's going to cycle over when power goes out. Duh, right?
Yeah.
Duh. So that's a criteria. We recognize that. And my scribe's not keeping up.
Just a second.
So sorry. After adequate space.
Adequate space, instantaneous power. We need an instantaneous power source, and I think in most of the scenarios we've come up with, instantaneous backup power for many of the scenarios which we can imagine is a requirement. And that power needs to translate into heating for sure, cooling, hopefully, which is a bigger generator load if you're going to try to run an air conditioner. I mean, assuming you got gas heat, you got a bigger generator load if you're going to try to run some air conditioning compressors. So we're talking about, an earthquake disrupts our power grid and it's in the middle of July. Woo, I want some air conditioning I can sleep in. So we're talking about HVAC, both heated and cooling. What are other things we need? We're talking about having shelter for duration. How long? We're talking about, I keep saying this about instantaneous. We got that up there. We need instantaneous. And instantaneous backup power. I think we need pretty quick access. There's other things.
The timing is covered in that handbook to a certain point
Okay.
on American Red Cross regulations.
Yeah.
They'll work to get a more permanent situation. They'll carry it for so long in shelter, emergency shelter. And then they're gonna try to work to get them a more permanent situation.
Right.
That an emergency shelter is just that. It's just for a period of time until they can help you find something else or get you back into your own. It's not gonna be should not be a long term.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
if it does, then from what I read, the Red Cross would bring in the federal part of the American Red Cross. Instead of the local Paducah office, Kentucky State, it go to the federal level.
And also, the way I know that First Baptist is set up is they had a committee, and I'm sure they can reactivate that, that as soon as the Red Cross declares it an emergency, there is someone from the church who is required to be down there and open the building within 30 minutes time. And there will be a member of the church, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, will be stationed at the church 24/7. There has to be a member of the church there while the Red Cross is there.
So we need manning. Gotta have manning.
If I may one more time. The Red Cross, according to their handbook, they appoint their own people for that situation. Or once it's open, it becomes
The
theirs.
Who opens it?
church
Probably
open.
Ray Tucker.
No. Who declares it's an emergency and the Red Cross shelter is on?
The Red Cross does, right?
Okay.
I mean, you may have to,
If we declare I don't really know the answer to that. I'm not even gonna try to go there.
Yeah. The Paducah, there's not a Paducah office anymore. They had some volunteers up there. And when you try to get a hold of Paducah, you get Owensboro.
Okay, when Ray tries to contact them, he always ends up with DC. Now, I don't know who he's talking,
Yeah.
I have no
Mhm.
idea.
Yeah, and I talked to him back when they had the big setup up there and I got their community liaison and stuff. So I'm really interested in that overnight need before the Red Cross has awareness, before it's monitored.
so
So,
they had at one time, they had the cots in a semi-trailer at First Baptist down there.
I sat there for
They sat there for a couple of years,
several years.
and they would have that to bring in.
In
Yeah.
that situation, I don't know what the outcome will be. I can tell you what my guess is. If funds are sent to First Baptist, I know what we will do. There will be, my guess, Gary, you know as much about this as I do, I think, is that deacons and their wives, Pastor Ewing and his wife, would be probably the first faces that people would see. At that point, I think there's a certain amount of training that we would have gone through where people have to check in, they have to do forms, there's all kinds of paperwork that they have to do as soon as they enter the door.
Mhm.
There'll have to be a reception area. And that, check them in, complete information on who is there.
yeah. I want to be a moderator here. We've got to, go through and try to look at this in a static form and try to understand what it is we're trying to achieve with the grant. And there's certain expertise and people have been through certain things and you got some, I understand we've had drills in the past at First Baptist and different relationships and things. But, we really need to take a look overall about what Calvert City can justify with the use of our tax dollars. And so, what is it that we're trying to get going? And we can Excuse me?
Yeah, I know the
With
Red,
the-
I know the Red.
I guess
Cross.
what I'm wondering is when we voted, when the council voted, we voted to issue a grant for generators. And I think that we're all aware of the different things that would be needed. And that's why we wanted the Red Cross involved, because we do not have the city personnel to do that unless y'all want to create some kind of citizens civil defense group. I mean, to me,
Yeah, well, let me redirect our thinking here, if I can, Nita. If we're going to set the grant format out to be specifically for generators, and different generator sites would offer different criteria, amenities, physical size, dimensions, commitment from an organization to get you through a period of time to which another agreement would kick in with Red Cross. So if I had a shack over here and I really want my shack lit up and it's only 2,000 square foot and has a privy, or if I have a very nice building that's got shower install and a bigger square footage and personnel that can do it, then if both folks were looking for assistance and keeping their lights on, which one would be the most attractive
Well, I
place
think-
to put your money?
I mean, we had that in, when Blair and I brought that, our first proposal up here, we had that, we had a size that we felt like, and I don't have the figures with me and I've forgotten what the square footage was, but it would have housed by the amount of, it was 4,500 square feet, and it would have housed a good portion of the people in Calvert City. And we were trying to write the grant to the fact that it would not, you would have to have a certain size building because we don't want to provide a generator or some other sort of help for 3 people when there's 1,000 people out there that need shelter.
Agreed.
I mean, those were the things that we were attempting to put in the grant.
Mhm. So what else should go in the grant? I mean, an ability to have, what triggers shelter use eventually, and then some kind of conversation how soon it could be manned, because police are going to be running everywhere, fire department's going to be running everywhere. So, the ability to man it's going to be an important thing, I believe.
I'm just looking for some.
Maybe a threshold question would be, do you want to simply provide a facility that the Red Cross could use in Red Cross sanctioned situations? If so, then you just do that. You provide power to a facility that the Red Cross is willing to man, and you're providing shelter when I don't know what the Red Cross contract says, but whenever it is that Red Cross is willing to step up and take control and provide services, then what the city has done is provided power to that facility. That's one way to approach it. The other approach is the one that you're sort of looking at right now.
But once the Red Cross rolls in, they've got a bazillion, they'll mobilize the army, and they'll mobilize the manpower, and they'll mobilize resources. Right? And they'll basically take your facility over.
Yeah.
And I understand that. So is really what we're looking at doing is giving or providing financial assistance to help people achieve Red Cross status.
I don't see it that way, because I think that, and I have been told, whether or not First Baptist gets this grant or not, they would still be available if there was a need from the city. That if there was a disaster, their doors would be open.
I don't doubt that for a minute.
Well, their doors have always been open. And I would dare say that that would be the same comment from any church in Calvert
I
City.
believe that to be true. Yeah.
The simple truth of the matter is First Baptist is the only entity who has come to us with this
You know, we haven't,
possibility. It does not rule out everybody else, but they are the only ones who have presented us even a semblance of a plan. When we get a grant together, then we may get more applicants, and that's fine.
well, I want, it needs to be, make sure it is fine.
Well,
And that's, I'm trying to keep it plain vanilla without
right,
appearing.
right. The more shelters that we could have,
We don't have unlimited funds. I'm sorry, that's our conundrum. We don't have unlimited funds.
no,
that
we
could-
don't have, but the
could
more shelters
satisfy
we
every-
could have would
every-
be wonderful.
Yeah, it would be.
We wouldn't necessarily have, I mean, we have $100,000 that we have voted to do this and to write a grant. And to me, I mean, to me, this is, in a sense, it's already been discussed. Maybe that's me, maybe I'm wrong.
As I remember the conversation, I thought it was, I may be remembering it wrong. I thought it was for whoever took this was going to be partnering with the Red Cross. That's what I thought
And it's a
the
lot of work.
situation was going to be. That's why a lot of the conversations has been talked about with First Baptist Church, was because this was something that they was wanting to do. And we was trying to figure out that this would be good for the community. How could we go about helping this? Because they were going to be part of the situation, that the Red Cross was going to be part of the situation. I understand what Gene's saying. What are we going to do in between that time, between the Red Cross coming and taking over? How do we set that up? That's what you're initially asking, and it's how are we going to
Well,
set up
as
the
a
small
person,
time frame?
as
Right.
the executive authority that is drawn into the emergency operations plan, which delineates weather, which delineates earthquake,
Right.
which delineates Marsh County as chemical emergencies, but Calvert City in particular, we feel it a lot more pressing. The sheltering of the people in the immediate short-term period
Mhm.
is very pressing. Now, the bigger picture is, we know from what we've witnessed Mayfield go through, and even our own community go through, and the contracting and all the other stuff is big and convoluted, and depending on how much has been put on your personal plate, how you conduct yourself in there, how you find enough money to do that. To me, the sheltering need is very needful in the very short term. And even before they realize that even I guess the magnitude of the destruction. If the destruction can be very big for this community, and we may not get Red Cross attention. It could be very impactful here and be very detrimental to people in our community that we need to provide for. And we'd be a blip on the radar of Red Cross. And I don't have a bad word to say about Red Cross personally, but some folks say they're like an army, very bureaucratic, very, very whatever. And so once you get in for the long haul, they're going to do it their way. And they've been through many times, and it's going to be their way. Okay. So you got some folks who observe that in a not so pleasant tone. And so, as a criteria of being only folks who are Red Cross, in my view, is a very positive thing. But, excluding folks who don't meet the criteria, doesn't seem very wise, because Red Cross has been around the block, been through many things, and they set those 144-page books plus. There's a reason they do that. But for what I believe we're trying to do is try to equip us in our community to respond at the judge in Marsh County Emergency Operations Plan. The county judge says, hey, we're under these deals, and then certain things happen. We've got a convalescent center here. We got an elementary school here and those kinds of things in our emergency are in the emergency operation plan. So the proximity to the school is something we've talked about and it's not on that list yet. I think proximity
the-
to the population center,
And
we've
it
talked about
already
that.
been set up, the school children go to First Baptist. That is a done deal. That's where they go.
Is that part of the emergency plan for the school?
Yes. That's what I was told. If there's a big emergency at the school,
I'm not allowed to discuss the emergency plan.
okay.
Okay. Well, it's a public
Oh,
document. We can darn
well,
sure
no,
weigh
I'm
in.
sorry. I would say for the safety of the children, I can understand that.
Yeah,
That would be a confidentiality.
The pathway has a very close proximity to the rest home. Both of those facilities are centrally located.
Mhm.
One of the worst things about, just saying, if we thought Altona, is it's going to be, if there were power lines down and trees down and things like that, it would be more difficult to get the majority of our people out there than it would here. When you have Calvert Heights and you have Kingswood and all of that, you can get to those two facilities easily. You can get there on foot.
The proximity issue is that, I'm trying to organize it all in my head. Is that Red Cross or not Red Cross? Is it when Red Cross is
the
involved or not Red
proximity
Cross?
is a criteria.
That's the city criteria.
There'd
Whether
be-
Red Cross is involved or not?
I don't know where it stands on Red Cross weighting factors. I don't have a clue.
And
You know, for that matter, a potential applicant might be Catholic Church. I don't know. I haven't had any dialogue with them at all.
well, you
and-
can't
and
get any
they're-
applicants till you get a grant.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's
open
right.
it up for
And so
everybody.
that's why we're trying to develop what we're going to open up to everybody. And
I think
the,
Red Cross has, doesn't it, your facility have to be so big and it's a lot of work to get them to agree to use. your-
oh, tons. And that's why we have experienced people in our midst.
Yes, I know, but they went through a lot.
Yep.
I just know that not all of our churches here probably have that type of space. The Catholic Church probably being one of them, a little smaller, the Presbyterian Church is smaller.
So what we're tasked with doing is trying to have a grant program. So where folks can actually apply for something and actually get some real help and not a bunch of words. That's what we're after. And so trying to get the council's brain wrapped around to the understanding of what this thing looks like. And what are some of the criteria that could be weighting factors, or we may have to do it some other way. I'm not sure.
Well, if we have voted this for a grant, and the council has voted it for a grant, I don't think that anybody sitting on the council would want to put the city at risk in any form or fashion. But I would dare say that if you will look at risk factors, the risk of the city being sued is far less than there being some sort of a major disaster.
Well, some sort of
That's just-
disaster is a certainty, isn't it?
It is. Then would it not be more, trying to think of the right word, pertinent on our behalf as the city council, since we have already voted this, to have the grant, quit worrying about if we're going to get sued, and have the grant out there, and then if there's concern about it, let's send it to the Attorney General and let's get his opinion on it. If it's that big a deal that we're going to get sued over it,
Well,
or if it's
I
that,
haven't mentioned sued one
no,
time
you
tonight.
haven't. No, you haven't. Or if this is going to be so complicated that the council wants to rescind their motion, then I will do everything I can do to help raise money privately. I feel like this is something that is good for the city. I don't think that we ought to be throwing money willy-nilly everywhere, but I feel like that we should have had it done by now. We should have had it there. We should have had a grant ready and then we can decide whether they meet the criteria. I mean, it's just not rocket science to protect your people. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, and I feel like that I am between going down rabbit holes and going into one meeting and thinking it's one way and coming to the next meeting and I'm gone from grants to proposals. And I have sent you emails. I don't know that you've even read some of the stuff that I sent you. And I understand how busy you are and how much you have to do. But this just should not be this way if you're trying to protect your people. And I'm not mad. I'm just tired. And you have the quorum, so I will let you all discuss it. And I'm really not mad. I'm just disappointed that it has to be like this. And you can let one of your employees have that because I won't need it and it might help them.
Andina, you've shown leadership in this, and I really wish you wouldn't leave. Because basically, you've got council members that are listening to this, and they're going to have to decide whether they're in or out. And you need to be here.
I'm very proud of you.
I
And
think the
my vote still stands.
Yeah, I think the council's already expressed that we want the grant. That it's either gonna be, we're gonna do a grant, or the city's gonna have to step up and fund one ourselves, and we're gonna have to run it ourselves. I mean, that's where we're basically at.
You
And I don't
know,
think that's really the option we're looking to go down.
If this city had the money
Right,
to build
right.
a shelter, I
Exactly.
still think the better option would be to find somebody in the community to partner with versus building a building that would solely be a shelter only.
I agree totally. I think that's the
Okay.
reason why we've gone. the
But
way
we
that
don't
we've gone.
have the resources for it, but even we
Right.
did have the resources for it. I mean, you could take a look at the new civic center and multi-use stuff, but you know what? You wouldn't have the folks who would be there when you needed them. You would,
Yeah.
you'd have the cots stored somewhere and you need them and they'd fall out to the ground.
Yeah.
So this is something I think you'd better partner with as opposed to if you had the funds to build your own. We don't. But
It's just, we're at the point now that we need to find out how to write the grant. Is that what, that's where we're at, is what do we want as the criteria?
That's
of
what
the
we're trying to
grant?
do. We're trying to establish
Right.
criteria and who is responsible for what.
Right,
Put it in the paper, and we've got to have that information because we can't really go forward without knowing there's certain items that we need to know. And that's what we need to get answered, is how you want to proceed with this. You know, in certain instances, if Red Cross doesn't issue it, it's not a disaster declared by the president. Can the mayor issue it?
Okay, I had that in the first draft that Blair and I fixed. We had that in the first draft, that an emergency, I wish I'd brought my paperwork with me, but it was an emergency declared by the Red Cross, by any state or federal authorities, or the authority of the mayor, or at the church's discretion.
And, wait, I'm sorry.
Can I expand on that? During the tornado last year, there was a family with a newborn baby and a couple of other little people. And I believe they were living on Retirement Circle. They were scared to death. And they called. And we put them at First Baptist Church. Pastor stayed with them and a deacon until the storm had passed over. So
yeah, we didn't talk about that part of it. Yeah.
regardless of what happens, I promise you, First Baptist will have those doors open. Red Cross, money from the city or not. Because these are the people, these will be the people that need to be reached.
But I was told that Greg said that maybe we didn't need to have all of that in there. That after you had those emergencies, then the church could do whatever they wanted to do if none of those were called, which makes sense. But it makes sense having it in there as well to me. Also, on the mayor's designation, that we would have to have the mayor or his designee. You know, I mean, which is fine. I mean, if the mayor John's not here, I'd say one of the council members could say it's an emergency.
Yeah, we
You
got.
know, I
plans to
mean,
do that.
do you have to go down the line to everybody that's going to declare one, or could you just say, you know, I just don't see why you have to just keep going down these things when some things can be taken for granted, that this is a normal order of the way things would be. So that I have tried to address that.
Okay, so we'd kind of circled wagons, wanted to check support in general. Nita supports it, Chris supports it,
Sarah supports it.
Panera supports it.
Yeah, I think I do too.
Okay,
It seems like maybe I don't understand the nuances of the conversation here, but it seems like they were looking for the absolute perfectly worded document and all of the plans for every eventuality. I mean, not literally every eventuality,
yeah.
but and maybe what we should do is do this as we have it right now, knowing that it's not probably perfect and there could be something that we haven't considered. Come back and look at this in a year. And I'm not talking about the funding of the generator at that point, but in the organization that might be needed as we go forward to cover things we didn't think of this time, but to do this with this generator in a church that's willing to do this and has this understanding or whatever it is they have with the Red Cross. It seems like that to me touches a lot of the bases, maybe not all, but
And
why don't we just go forward?
okay.
And I've expressed that, I'll just interrupt a minute with what Ralph's saying about, you know, you'd like to have a perfect plan. You'd like to have every scenario addressed. But the company I work for is very big on rules and regulations and making sure that they have an answer for everything that comes up. If it's a rule violation or something out of the ordinary comes up, they are very, very, very conscientious about what they do, but I can guarantee you about every other tournament, there will honestly be something that comes up that has never happened before, and we will have to figure out a way to address it.
Right.
But I will go ahead and say, but by trying to look ahead and solving some of those problems, it is easier to solve the ones that do come up.
That's why I said what I said,
Right.
coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
In that vein, a simple, clean way, let me just throw this out and see what you guys think. A simple, clean way of doing it would be to say our intention, we think having, assisting Red Cross in the provision of emergency services in Calvert City is a worthwhile endeavor. We think that's a worthwhile endeavor. And providing them a facility with power, we think is meets a public purpose.
And I had the public purpose lined out in that finding as well.
But if that were the purpose, to provide power to a facility that Red Cross, under Red Cross's whatever, would utilize.
Well, emergency power is
Yeah.
not a requirement evidently for Red Cross certification. But it improves the situation because we get this instantaneous.
You didn't ask Jeremy, by the way.
Yeah, Jeremy, we're coming back. Jeremy? But
Well, let me just say, if that would solve a big chunk of things if the purpose was to facilitate Red Cross service in the city. That's the public purpose. to provide power to facilitate Red Cross service in the city. Okay, that gets you down the road. You can deal with that. Now, does it necessarily provide other services? No, not necessarily. There's no contract that the facility has to be open, but as we've all observed, yeah, it's gonna be. I mean, the reality is, whatever the facility is the people who own the facility are going to be willing to use it for warming or what, all the other services when Red Cross is not involved. But in order for you guys to justify it, you justify it simply on the basis that we're providing power to a Red Cross contracted facility. Then next year, if you wanted to take it a step further and expand services or whatever, you could look at doing some such thing. So that would be a enunciable public purpose that's easily identified. And if you guys determine that, yeah, that's a worthwhile expenditure of funds, then you can do that. The follow-up question is going to be, okay, how do we divvy up the funds among qualified applicants? But I think we've heard there probably are only, if that is the objective, there's probably only 2 qualified applicants in the city.
If that's the criteria, you're correct.
If that's the criteria, that limits the number of applicants greatly, because I think I'm hearing that there are only 2. So that makes that decision that problem a little less complicated, because at most you're dividing the available grant funds by 2. So that gives you, that resolves a lot of issues and gets you down the road and answers the questions.
Jeremy's walking.
Yep. Hey, Jeremy,
Yes.
we've been around the block and you're at now. As far as the intent of the grant and to continue and get this process rolling in a sensible way, you support it? Still on
Yeah.
board? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm with Ralph, we're not going to have a perfect first draft, and whatever some of these previous meeting roadblocks have been to try to, massage it into a perfect thing first draft, that we should probably just give it our best shot and work it along the way. But yes, full support. It's a resource that, emergency scenarios, we can't even predict them, then they're not going away. Weather events are not getting any better, and we should have something like this.
Okay.
I have, if you don't care, this is just to let you know. Calvert City Council has established a one-time grant opportunity to better prepare and protect Calvert City citizens in the event of a natural disaster, extreme emergency, or other catastrophic situation. The grant will be created with the public funds and fulfills the definition of public purpose by primarily benefiting and promoting the welfare of the local government and its citizens within the community, and not solely for the benefit of a specific person, interest, or private entity. The emergency power grant is designed to ensure the security and safety of citizens by providing electric power for emergency shelter during a prolonged electric power outage resulting from a natural disaster, extreme emergency, or other catastrophic event. The objective of the grant is to ensure the promotion of the public health, safety, and general welfare affecting residents within Calvert City. Furthermore, the grant will promote security and safety of persons and property within the city and aid in maintaining supplies and services essential to the city and community at large. Grant opportunities will be provided to nonprofit organizations with brick and mortar facilities located within the city limits of Calvert City, which seek to upgrade facilities with a permanent generator to be used in public emergency situations for Calvert City citizens. Applications will be reviewed and determined by the selection committee. Applications must meet all eligibility requirements to be considered, and funds will be awarded up to a maximum of $75,000 per grant. That was said, before we talked about maybe taking 75,000 because we didn't know that there was anybody else interested, and then taking the other 25 and try to give smaller grants to the other churches for maybe less essential things that weren't, maybe for a smaller generator or something like that. Well, since there may be two larger entities, to start with, we don't know how much they're going to ask for. Let's just say if Church P and Church F decided to come in and they both asked for $50,000, we could take that $100,000 if they met all the criteria and give each entity 50,000. If Church P decided they only needed 30,000, then we could grant them the 30,000, and then we would have 70,000 to go to Church F if they had applied for 75,000.
Yeah, so
If they both-
there's gonna be applicants.
If
and-
they both, if they both apply for 75,000, then we're just gonna have to divide it up again, 50-50,
Well-
or if we had more, and that's the,
If people want to make an answer to the proposal, then, and I think it ought to be the council to, looking at it, you got to figure out what you can find. We got a budgetary amount of 100. And then we don't know who's willing to take up the yoke and get involved here. And so we don't know what the requests are going to be until you see them.
right.
Right.
And you can't get the request till you get the grant, maybe.
So you get the application out there so people can figure out a way to apply. And you see what's out there as far as community partners willing to partner with you, and you see what we can pull off. And there's some legal mumbo jumbo that we need to absorb the best we can. And I overwhelming support here. And I'm trying to make sure that it's, we have everybody who's interested, and, there's resources around here that I certainly don't know about. Then I'm going to expect there to be some things on the table that I hadn't thought about from people that I might not know.
Well, and one of the things too, that's if we can pull this together and it can be successful, this can pave the way to more grants, where if we maybe needed grant for a more entailed disaster relief plan, or to use it for economic development, other things. We've always shied away from the city offering grants. And if we get our feet in the water over a very good cause like this one is, then we may be setting the way to do some other things that we've never done in the past that would equally benefit our city.
It is true to say we've never funded a grant. Okay, so this is cutting new teeth, and that's why it's a bit.
Yes, we have to.
Well,
We
the,
funded grant, who cares? We funded. grant. Yes, we did.
what, yeah,
We
yeah,
did have a business.
that's right. And to me, the amount of the grant, the criteria for a small grant, or the depth that you have to go, if she was able to write grants with the CARES thing, then just because this is more money, it shouldn't have to be that much more complicated.
I hear you.
I wish FEMA looked at it that way. We were getting our public assistance monies
Yeah,
back.
but we're not FEMA. We're.
I
the
understand
city.
that, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
We were
I wish
asking-
they
we
all
were
did.
asking
I'm sure
FEMA
we
for
all
money.
did. Hey, I wish I could get that $1 billion California grant.
Is Red Cross involvement okay? Is that okay? Can we move forward with that thought? That what we're doing is funding Red Cross facilities?
Well, in my view, Greg, it's different than that. My view is, as we've had the public come out today and point out and remind us that Red Cross are the experts. So it's not that we are funding Red Cross. To me, it's more as we're using Red Cross as a certification, if you will. And if a facility achieves Red Cross status, and now listen, we'll have no sway in what Red Cross certifies or not, other than we're going to look at them as being the leaders. And if they can make an agreement with the facility, then it's certification that it's a real deal and meets many, many criteria. And it's something that's worth funding. It's worth helping. So the presence of a generator at a place improves and that's why I keep harping on the short term. That's in my heart of hearts where I know that we need help, is in that short term, is when that roof is blown off in the middle of the night and we got somebody in a vehicle who needs to get out of a vehicle and get cleaned up and get a good night's rest so they can worry about the other stuff in the daylight.
Yeah.
That's why it's so critical. So, the Red Cross will certify a facility without a generator, is best I understand. But this is to help that overall performance. And so we're wanting to partner. So to me, does that make sense that it's a certification? Now, it's like an independent party. We got no control over it. We're not paying a fee for the certification. We aren't really interfacing with them. We're not drawing up any requirements that any kind of relationship takes place. But almost by definition, if they got an agreement with Red Cross at some point, if the mayor or the judge or the governor or whoever says, hey, we got a problem, in the middle of the night, nobody cares about that. Nobody gives a rip. The phone call is going to be made. The phone numbers is part of our emergency response plans, emergency action plans, and I've somehow folded into the emergency operations plan. We call this person or that person, and it gets rolling, and the door gets unlocked, and guess what? There's people there too. And so the lawyers have the nightmares of, they had a teenager getting loose in First Baptist Church and graffitiing up the elevator or whatever. I mean, that's something different in an emergency. But we do need bodies there because our emergency services, the two chiefs, their people are going to be out after it, bringing people back to it. So I'm kind of liking the way this is forming up is having Red Cross be certification. And then we're going to see what proposals come to the table and what we're going to be able to do as far as deciding what the city can do within the constraints of the budget that we budgeted. And if it's more or maybe less, or maybe we have to thinking about some things and they're not good enough and we need to up the ante. Okay. But we got, so tonight, get us on the same page about the public purpose of why we're doing this. To get us on the same page that we have unanimous support of the council that's here, that we still want to proceed down it. That meets my objective for tonight. It does. And I think we're going to have more than one group that's interested in this, and praise the Lord, right?
Right. And
That's great.
The other thing about that is too, if we can do that, then next year we could maybe offer and get more people in,
And we've got already have some unique things happening in our community as far as people positioning themselves. And I'm going to talk about the Presbyterian Church positioning themselves to be a base camp. And that's a horse of a slightly different wheelbase, but
very honorable and very.
but that's
welcome.
something too. And that's great. So with that, I think that I've had my say, and I really appreciate you coming out on a beautiful night. Enjoy it. And tomorrow, before we go back to where we're supposed to be, I guess less. Yes, Chief.
I wasn't gonna say this, but I've sat here listening to this, and my only concern is how are we gonna get a commitment to where we feel comfortable? Whoever gets this, and it don't make a hell of a difference to me who gets it. The only thing that concerns me, which by being a responder to the deal we had at Calvert Shores and up in there, is the people that are gonna be responsible for this, are they gonna be willing to get out here and walk from their house to that place? When you can't get through it with a four-wheeler. And folks, if you wasn't there 30 minutes after this thing went through, you do not know what was going on there. I was there 30 minutes after we got through. And if we hadn't had our side by side, went through ditches, probably some places that we shouldn't have gone. I took a fire truck, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this, but that's okay too. Because I took a fire truck in places that I normally wouldn't take, because I wanted to get there and help.
Desperate times calls for desperate
Understand.
measures.
But, and the people that are interested in this, gonna be committed enough to leave their family when a disaster is going on, to help somebody else. That is a big commitment from people. I don't know how you would do that, but that's my concern out of tonight.
And that's the voice of experience. I mean, when you get down to it with our first responders, when stuff's hitting the fan, you're leaving the ones you love to go help folks. And, you know, we got to have that, you know, that the organizations are going to be good at this, or, you know, the folks who are on that call list, they got to understand that. And so you get whoever you love and they go with you. And that's a possibility on the shelter thing that could happen. And it can't happen in some cases, but it's like in desperate times call for desperate measures. You get the chainsaws out and you take the side by side and you shuttle people and get some comms going. I mean, if the things we're talking about, the comms may not be working. We may be actually going banging on doors. So part of the contact list, we need a street address to get there. And so, you know, when stuff comes unglued, well, I've got it on my laptop. Really? That battery's down. Where are you going to plug it in? You know, so you need paper. And so, you know, all those are probably the emergency action plans. That's a very good point, Chief. I appreciate that. And I think that's that talk is to be had with folks, you know, hopefully on an evenings event where you're talking to the people who want to volunteer for a program. That's the kind of stuff that people love to hear. So.
And having some kind of citizens organization for something like that wouldn't really be such a bad idea once you get some stuff in place.
Yep.
Your grant requirements are only a minimum, Tim. You know, the minimum will be something like you got to maintain a contract with Red Cross and be available and make it available for Red Cross to use in an emergency. That's your minimum. That qualifies you to get the grant. But that doesn't mean that's all you can do. You've got a facility that's got a generator, and you've got a community that you live in. And so you get your friends, you be people, you go do what you got to do. What we're just, the only thing that we're really doing here tonight is describing what's the minimum. What's the public purpose that we can identify, that a usable line. How can we draw a usable line? Well, we're drawing. But that's not the only thing you can do. That's just what's required to get that's just the metric for the grant.
And we do have further down there that the grant, they would agree, part of the agreement would be that they would agree to have the generator and have this agreement with Red Cross for like 15 years, because that's basically the life of a generator, and they will be, whoever it is, will be responsible for all the maintenance and upkeep. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's been a great conversation. Hopefully not overly stressful. I mean, the wheels of government get complicated a little bit. And I appreciate you coming in for a special call. And I don't think we could ever gotten through this in a normal routine council business. And, you know, we're coming down in November, December pretty quick. And I appreciate you coming. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Kevin's not here, so we can't adjourn.
Who wants to be Kevin, Chris?
Have a second.
Second.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Hi, Birdie.
Say bye.
Wait that way.
Wait this way. Hi, Birdie. See Jeremy's little girl. Seriously, if one of your city workers can use this, I've got the box at home.
You got the password?
I don't.
You're not an iPad person?